My name is Praveen Sharma. I am one of this year's Symposia volunteers. I would like to welcome you all to Crafting Data Strategies That Pay Off. This panel is hosted by MIT Sloan CISR, and CISR is Center for Information Systems Research. I need slides. Give me a second. So CISR greatly appreciates its patrons. How's the day? Where do you go up and down?
No, Mrs. Swin here.
There you go. I would also like to, it's my great privilege to welcome the panel, the moderator of this panel, Dr. Barbara Haley Wixom. She is the principal research scientist at MIT CISR, and please welcome Dr. Barbara.
My 25th year of studying how companies make money with data. In 1994, I was more of a cheerleader. I literally had to wave my arms, jump up and down to get CIOs to pay attention to their data. Today, my role has shifted. Sometimes I'm a therapist, but most times, I'm a researcher who is really needed to inform how we move forward with data fruitfully. Because we are swimming in data, and we know we need to make money from it, but not the way we used to. In '94, we kept data inside the organization, we cut costs with it, we restricted access to it. That doesn't work today. Today, our data strategies require bold moves, really new ideas. I'm going to start today sharing 3 ideas, if we can show slides, that our research shows need to be in your data strategies. Idea 1, generate top-line returns from data. We are great at cost-cutting with data. In fact, last year we researched 315 CXOs, and we found that 51% of our data monetization returns come from operational efficiencies. For a bank like BBVA, this means things like optimizing our branches. In 2015, that resulted in over $40 million in savings for the bank. But that means that 49% of our current returns from data come from top-line activities. For BBVA, this means selling data in the form of anonymized payment data through a service called PayStats. It also means analytics features for its mobile app. So for instance, a transaction predictor for its personal banking. This type of feature lifts customer wallet share, market share, retention, and also contributes to BBVA being recognized by Forrester for the last 2 years as best mobile banking. These top-line activities are becoming really important because they're contributing more to our overall company revenues. In fact, when we looked at our data from the survey, we found that when you look at top-performing companies, and this is in terms of firm performance, profitability, revenue growth, innovation, agility, and when you compare top performers to bottom-performing companies, the top performers on average realize 10% more of overall company revenues from data than bottom performers. So we need to be thinking about how to generate top-line returns from our data. Number 2, build information business capabilities. As we rely more on data for overall company revenues, what that means is our business models need to morph to become more like those of information businesses. Think LexisNexis, Google, Bloomberg. Those types of companies know how to deliver data analytics to the marketplace in ways that are highly valued by customers. And what's neat is over the last decade plus, we've been studying these companies and looking under the hood. And what we found are 5 capabilities that help them be great. They have data that people can find, use, and trust. They have data platforms that serve up data reliably and really fast, both inside as well as outside of the firm. They have data science that can detect insights that humans can't. They have deep customer understanding of not just core needs, but also latent needs. And they have data governance in place that oversees not just compliance, but also values and ethics. Here's what's great. When we looked at our data across all companies, we found that these capabilities work not just for information businesses, but for all companies. And so if you're investing in these capabilities, then you will be seeing much more activity and progress, and more importantly, economic returns from your data monetization efforts. Idea 3, prepare your culture for the algorithmic economy. The algorithmic economy is here. This is a world in which our organizations need employees pervasively who habitually use data, algorithms that are informing key tasks. And companies now who are ahead in this are ones with data science training for all employees. They're using advanced techniques like machine learning. They have methodologies for evidence-based decision-making in place. And what we're finding is companies with these characteristics, they're seeing returns. They have payback that's 9 months sooner from their data analytics projects and 6% more in the form of ROI from those projects. So this is what we need to shoot for. If we're looking for data strategies that pay off, we need to think about top-line returns, building the right capabilities, creating a special type of data culture. Now, what I'm going to do is transition from an academic conversation to one that's much more applied. We have 4 incredible leaders in the area of data analytics who have agreed to join us today. These 4 have made bold moves regarding their data strategies, and they're executing in a way that's really showing some nice payoff. So please join me to welcome Elena Alfaro from BBVA, Meyer from Tetrapack, Mike Picone from Adobe, and Donna-Maree from Bank of Queensland.
We didn't do that very well.
I know, that's okay.
Okay.
But this is good. So you all have incredible stories.
We didn't do that well.
Everyone set? Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm very excited for the audience to hear what you have to say. I'd like to start with you, Elena. So you have gotten some well-earned recognition recently. So Best Mobile Banking from Forrester. Your case of data monetization won the Society for Information Management award last year for best practice. Why is this happening? What is the recognition about? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your secret sauce?
Okay, very difficult to summarize this in a few seconds, but okay, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me here. It's a huge honor to be here. So for BBVA, data is being the main pillar of our digital transformation for some years now. So we started back in 2012, trying to start incorporating data science or new data technologies capabilities beyond data mining. So this was already almost 7 years ago, with very basic two ideas. No, one is we thought that we needed to be much better in supporting human decision-making within the bank. So everybody thinks that the bank should be very, data-driven, and the fact is that it's not always the case. And the other idea was to start using, by that time, starting using algorithms as the brains of our digital products. So these were the main, focuses that we started working on. And yeah, we've done very different things. Maybe to summarize the results, and maybe we can talk about the hows later in the panel. But the results, to me, what I feel more proud of is what you said. So we've been named as the best mobile app in the world of all the banks, not only traditional banks, for 2 years by Forrester. And the other one, which I think is interesting also, is that we already have more than 50% of our sales through digital channels, which is, it might not sound that much for a digital company, but for a 150-year-old bank, it's already a lot. So.
Although I think we should talk a little bit about the how right now, because this is a really interesting story in that BBVA, you started off a very traditional bank before you started on your data journey, but you really wanted to shake it up. And as Elena explained, they had really aggressive goals in terms of what they wanted to achieve. And so to do that, you actually established a separate legal entity called Data and Analytics in order to, I guess, to cultivate and nurture a new kind of talent, a new kind of mindset that then would serve as leadership at first for the bank.
Yeah. So when we started in 2012, the thing wasn't even called big data, not even AI, of course, no? So we started to realize that there was a new type of talent, a new type of people that were dealing with data in a different way than we were doing. So the first time, I remember I was given 2 positions to bring this type of people to the bank. I tried to get help from the human resources area in the bank. And I mean, it was really, really difficult to find this type of people with the mindsets that we had at that time. And then whenever we found these people, we realized that their idea of a career didn't match that well with what we could offer them, 6 years ago. No? So we took this decision of having a separated entity focused specifically on attracting and retaining this type of talent. So I had the honor to be the CEO of this company for 3 years. It grew up to 50 people. And in there, what we tried to do is to prove the rest of the organization that there was a lot of value on doing things in a different way, having new technologies, having new ways of using data at a much more granular level compared to what we were doing before. So we selected a few use cases, especially in Spain, because we had the platform capabilities basically there by that moment. So we started developing and delivering cases on a very short-term basis, 3 months, in order to prove that we were on the right path. So that was the beginning, and we also started working with this idea of spreading the culture of data, beginning with the specific business units where we were collaborating with, because what I've learned since then is that if the other person you're sitting with on the table doesn't understand really, really well the capabilities of data and also the limitations, then it's very difficult to get to do something, big.
One of the motivators I know was that as you were establishing your use cases, you were measuring the economic impact. Yeah. And I have to say, this is one of the things we don't see in a lot of organizations is taking the time and purposely measuring the value in a credible way, and really accounting for the returns that you're driving. And we find that when companies take the time to do this, they usually realize pretty nice payoffs. Can you just describe briefly your economic impact framework?
Yeah, well, in fact, it's really simple. It goes to the basic of the economic impact of an organization. So we try to analyze three types of returns. One was increases in revenue, the revenue side, in terms of, new customers, new users of certain applications, more, the campaigns that were more effective in certain areas, the scorings that we were implementing came up with better prediction capabilities, etc. So that is revenue. The other part, and it's not only one of the three, some of the projects had the three, no? The second one is cost reduction, so whenever the thing goes into efficiency. And the third one was more like more reputational oriented, and also thinking of the idea of to what extent are we learning or are we kind of innovating with this use case. So with these three ideas, we started measuring, and which I think is more important, and we still have to do it a lot, is to show the rest of the organization the facts behind what we were doing. And I have to say that sometimes it's really, really difficult to measure because people don't know what is the baseline. So when they tell you, let's do this because we want to improve the campaigns on whatever product, and you ask them, okay, what is the baseline? What would you consider success? They don't know. So again, we have to come and start implementing very new or more sophisticated A/B testing technologies or methodologies, et cetera.
Right.
But very important still today.
And you had to hire someone with a finance background to help you establish methodologies and such?
Well, in fact, I am an economist myself, so I saw that very clear because I've been very lucky to work with engineers, with mathematicians for the past few years, but I have to say that even if they are very much data-driven on the things that they deliver, they don't care that much on the economic impact of the things. So we try to also learn that internally.
That's wonderful. Now, Donna, we have another bank. This is fortunate because we have two financial services companies here, but very different approaches to how you've embraced data and moved along in your journey. How would you compare yours or contrast to the BBVA approach, which to many is pretty radical, establishing a separate legal entity to drive change? I mean, that's a pretty aggressive way to move forward, but that might not be desirable or even possible with a lot of companies.
Well, first of all, I mean, I'm a huge fan, and we do follow sort of BBVA. So we think we hopefully you're going to stand on the shoulders of giants. And previous organisations that I've worked at also, I've had quite advanced sort of approaches to data and analytics and how to really turn that into customer value. So when I joined BOQ, Bank of Queensland, in about 4 years ago, I was quite perplexed where they hadn't sort of got on that same journey as fast. So we really needed to sort of regroup. We needed to learn, and we needed to leverage fast, and we needed to really lean into the execution. It wasn't just straight into what's our proof of concepts in that context. There was probably three things that we had to get right first, and that was really alignment to our purpose. And we had to even establish being a purpose-led organisation. So there was a real cultural sort of shift from being sort of Australia's most loved bank to delivering more human and empathetic experiences to help customers and communities prosper. It changes our whole disposition around how we think about and how we value data and analytics to be able to sort of help drive that type of agenda. So that was sort of the first sort of change we had to do. The second one was around really building out the enablers for such an aspiration, and the technology environment was really critical to that. So implementing open ecosystem sort of model through internal and external exposed APIs, putting in a hybrid cloud sort of strategy and so on. So we've had to do a lot of those foundational pieces. And the third one is around execution excellence and regrouping across the organisation. What does that mean in the business and across the delivery teams? When we've applied that to our data and analytics strategy, we've probably simplified it in a way that the whole organisation could sort of relate to, and that was really how do we think about data? So that was, we had to first really value it. So what's our future capabilities that we needed there? I think you talked about it earlier. It covers sort of the policies and the culture, the data sort of led culture in the organisation, the sort of patterns and so on, and quality. So that really drives sort of the trust. The second one was around the platform and partnerships. So how do we get and give data? That was sort of our catchphrase in that one. We had to change the whole model around how accessible and democratised the data was and how accessible the data was externally and internally, so we could sort of create new value propositions. And then really how do we use it? So that's where the data scientists come in. That's where the customer-led value chain and journeys come in, and really what pain points are we trying to apply there. There's probably three examples that bring that to life, I think, is one of the first ones and more recent ones has been around our time to yes. So when somebody's doing a mortgage application, they're not really thinking about the mortgage itself, they're thinking about how fast can they get into their dream home. So what's that time to yes that they actually get approval, and what's that time to yes that they actually get the keys to their home. So we're using a partnership on data analytics that really helps with that whole acceptance process. Quickly goes through the documents, looks at sort of patterns and so on, and helps the customer navigate that process much faster. And that's sort of going to improve our time to yes. And it's very sort of a customer-centric measure that we're focused on there. The second example is around sort of how do we help prepare our customers in taking that sort of journey. So quite often our conversions are lower because people haven't actually thought about how they prepare their own home economics around being ready for that type of commitment on repayments, etc. So how do we go much earlier in the process? So developing the app that will help our customers prepare for that, understand their savings behaviours, understand their transactional behaviours, understanding what helps them with their credit scoring and so on. And that could be 6 months out or whatever. What we're finding that will convert to much more loyalty around trust and building that sort of model, and also help the conversion rate. So the bank spends a lot of money when we sort of go to evaluate somebody and they don't get through the gate. So those two things together I think are going to help it. And probably the third example is one more in the ecosystem model, where working with AI to help. We have a large agricultural business, and how do we help with machine learning around the yield of the farms? So helping them with their sustainable sort of value propositions. So it's not a banking transaction in the first instance, but it does help with the credit scoring. So again, it sort of lowers the cost and creates economic value for us, but more importantly, it creates, and goes back to our purpose, how do we help our customers in our communities prosper? So how do we sort of drive that type of aspiration?
Right. It amazes me how much learning you have probably amassed along the way as you've moved forward. And in fact, many of us, as we move forward in our data strategies, we don't start off with a playbook per se. We really are learning, we're experimenting, we're testing. But I have to say, at Adobe, Mark, you actually have a playbook, which I find really interesting. So you have to share, because that doesn't happen.
Sure.
So why don't you explain what's been happening at Adobe?
And to be clear, we didn't start out with a playbook. It was after we did the first one that we said, wow, this is pretty interesting.
But we can all now benefit, hopefully, from your playbook. Okay.
Exactly. So, when Adobe made its move to the cloud and subscription-based software for its hallmark products, think Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, it generated obviously massive amounts of new data. And the architecture to support all of that new data flowing in, and when you think about software products, they're all now heavily instrumented. So you think about all of them as little IoT devices that generate a lot of information to really understand how people are using and engaging with those products. The problem was the back office, if you will, that really was absorbing, and the whole corporation at large really was not really prepared to deal with how to properly structure and use this data to their advantage. The subscription model, however, unlike CD in a box, I'll see you in 2 years and hopefully you'll renew, means you have to prove your value every single month. So that value is only proven with deep levels of customer engagement. And if you can't measure customer engagement, if you don't know what they're doing with your products, you're in the dark, literally flying blind. So those types of problems were kind of the antithesis, what really drove us to creating what we now call this data-driven operating model. And initially it started out really as an IT-led initiative because we had data silos across the organization that were never really rationalized, not unlike almost every single organization out there. The data silos, however, were really creating basically different answers to the top-level management and CEO for the same question. They were giving metrics. How was your ARR? How was your traffic levels in this different region? One organization would say, yes, we're green. Another one would say, wait a minute, no, we're red. So it kind of causes a bit of a problem, right? So it's really about how to, our IT-led initiative was really going across all of these, initially it was about 5 to 6 key organizations. It was around data and data silos in finance, in marketing, in customer support, the go-to-market/sales team, and in marketing. So every one of those, plus a whole variety of different internal systems that we call our cloud technology, which support the rest of the subscription organization, things like libraries, identity, provisioning of product, et cetera. All of that data, we went and interviewed and really coalesced the data across each one of those organizations. And very quickly, we actually went through a process where we would actually say, what are your top analytical needs? What are the key questions you're trying to answer? And we got these very, very long lists. And then we said, well, let's kind of, what are your top 5? And then they became very up-leveled and vague. And it really didn't help us from a point of what to build first, what to focus on. We were in this sea of data. It felt like we were boiling the ocean. So we really then, at that point, very quickly took a pivot and said, we need a more outside-in approach. And this outside-in approach really led us to, was creating what we call customer journey steps. And when you think about a traditional consumer business where you're going online, you're buying software, you're downloading, using software, those different customer journey steps will really discover, finding the product, trying, free trials, buying it, using it, and renew. And what was really interesting is the simple, the very simple set of those 5 different discovery steps, we then applied to what are the owners of each one of those discovery steps within the organization. And they were then tasked with defining what are the key metrics you're going to use to run your business. And they were also tasked with what are the processes we're going to use around running those KPIs? What are the calls to action? And the playbook really came about by taking this inside-out approach, understanding the data, the governance aspects, the architecture, unified architecture, with the top-down, what I call the outside-in aspects of the journey steps, the owners, and the process. And those 2 things coming together is really what made the magic of what we call DDOM, or our data-driven operating model. What's been interesting is we went through and we really focused on one of those 5 organizations, and we landed and expanded. And that now unified data architecture and that set of capabilities, as well as the vocabulary, has just permeated the business. So there are literally meetings about discover, meetings about try, meetings about use. It's become part of the vocabulary. It's how they describe the business. It's how they talk about the business. It's how they run the business. There's literally a meeting with every single week with well over 100 people globally, and they're looking at a single analytical experience, if you will, and they go through step by journey step, region by region. Why is ARR up? Why is it down? What's traffic? What are our promos? They turn the knobs and they look at it again the following week and say, what has changed? And this really been profound in terms of how we've really done this at a scale across the size of Adobe. What's also been interesting is just the way we've been able to kind of, this playbook aspect of it has been very fascinating, because we took that journey steps. It doesn't have to be customer journey steps, by the way. So for HR, we have pre-hire to retire. For finance, we have procurement to purchase. Every one of those, you go and you approach your business users with a mechanism to understand and really push them to say, what are the metrics you're measuring your business? And then you say, what are the data is available? And then you push them together.
Wow. Now, Mark, you're putting a playbook in place right now. Mm-hmm. And so I have to tease you. Just so you all know, I got a call from Mark, I don't know, a couple of months ago. And he goes, Barb, would love to talk to you. We're working on our 2030 data strategy. And I'm like, really? I'm like, okay, I'm getting calls about people's like 2018 data strategy that they're like still trying to figure out. Really, you're working on. So first of all, let's be clear that Tetrapack is privately held. Okay, that's one of the reasons, I'm sure. But Mark, talk about this idea of a data strategy, which is amazing. It is. This is wonderful. I wish we could all be working on data strategies in that way. But maybe you can explain more about what's going on.
So you say 2030. I guess it doesn't sound so long because we've spent 20 years getting to where we are to be ready to take that next step.
That's
and
fair.
Actually, whether it's a 10-year strategy or short, it doesn't really matter. The whole point of that was to say, where are we now? Where do we want to be? And you have to stretch it far enough out so you don't think from the constraints and the problems that you have today, but rather what you want to be able to do in your future. So in 5 years, we're probably talking about the 2035 strategy instead. Right? But you have to constantly look, and I think more today than ever before. But if I go back a little bit, it was about 20 years ago, and you're going to think, wait a minute, we're talking about data, right? But 20 years ago, we made the decision to go to a process-oriented company with global process. So Tetrapack, unlike an information company, we're an industrial company. We're a business to business. Our customers need to pack good quality food that needs protection, like milks, juices, and the like. And we provide equipment to to take the raw milk and make it ready to pack, the packaging equipment that actually puts it in the package, the packaging material that becomes the package, and then all of the service that's needed to make sure your factory runs. So I don't produce any milk or juice, but juice and milk is produced on our equipment. It's an industrial company. We grew through expansion, market by market. We're now in 170 markets around the world. It's basically everywhere. You can't grow to the next market because we're already there. So as many did, you realize that somehow we have to create efficiencies. So we went on the ERP, process orientation and this journey. But if you think about it, although we didn't at the time, that's a lot about preparing your data. Because we had the same problem you talk about. You come to a board meeting, everyone has a different version of the truth. And that's because all of the information not only comes from different sources, but it's also managed or rolled up in a different way, whatever happens to be the drive. So how do you make decisions at a corporate level if you have different versions of the truth? Today we are in a single instance SAP solution, one machine in one location that runs for the world. 99.9 something% of our turnover
You're
runs
making
through
everyone really
one.
jealous right now.
So
you know that.
you got to be stubborn and patient. But what that means is that we have one single way of talking about how we run our business, and we have one copy of our operational data in the same format where all the definitions are always the same. And that means that with that data, we can take and drive better decision making. So you talk in your model, you have 3 ways to monetize data, right? Improving, wrapping, and then selling. So we've been a lot on the improving. But what we now see, and we're kind of at an inflection point, again, if you grew through expansion and now you're everywhere, what do you do next? Well, you either have to steal from somebody else, but if you're the market leader, that's hard to do, or you have to add on something else. And what we see now is that equipment out there that's placed in some 50,000 production lines, we've always locally monitored what happens in the machine. But what we didn't do was more than, on occasion, collect all that information back and look and see how our equipment is performing. So 3 years ago, we started a journey to start to connect live all of that data in so that we can move, for an industrial company that does service, a very simple move. You used to have break and fix. I'll come when it breaks. And then you said, that's no good. You went to preventative maintenance so it doesn't break. Now you can move to predictive maintenance, which is both better for the customer and better for us. But you can only do that if you know what's happening and you know how, through algorithms, to detect something before it happens and only replace it then. This is making a huge difference in our ability to drive a service business, which is much more competitive because there are other people that can serve equipment. If I take it one step further, most of our customers, maybe 50% of the machinery in their plant is our machinery, and the rest is from somebody else. Well, the customer doesn't just want our machines to work well. They want to produce good quality product every day, all the time. So we've also now begun to roll out what we call plant secure. The idea is we can help secure that your plant will operate at maximum efficiency, but then we need you to share your data that's not coming from our machine. Oh, by the way, that coming from our machines is actually your data too, which we have to make sure we have an understanding around. But if we have all that, then we can look at the full production, and we can start talking about things like outcome-based contracting. Because we have enough data to understand the risk and also the potential for the customer. And if we don't save you anything, we don't make anything. But if we save you something, then it should be a win-win for us. But so I go all the way back to the beginning. For us, getting the core data right, so we had a foundation, which meant master data programs. It meant a single data warehouse for all of your operational reporting, to build as a foundation so that we can now begin to bring in the massive amount of additional external data that we can put together to drive the business going forward.
Yeah. So not everyone starts with the single for me, data
Hey,
store.
can I tell you something? One thing I'm proud of?
Yeah.
This weekend, I moved the entire system from an SAP on Oracle to a HANA database over the weekend, and it worked.
Well done.
No one, I report to the CFO, and I sent him a message, because I had heard from my tech team some of the problems they were dealing with, and I said, so what are you hearing out there? And he goes, I don't think anybody knows you upgraded.
Oh, wow.
I was like, oh, it's the best thing you could ever tell me. Yeah.
Well, I will tell you, most of us are working with collapsing silos, as you mentioned, Mark. BBVA had an interesting approach, and so I am checking the Slido questions, just so you know. So if you keep sending those, I am taking a look to make sure we incorporate those. One of the questions, Elena, was about, in the economic framework, how you measured the reputational piece. So obviously you have the bottom line, you have the top line, and then the reputational piece. I want to answer for you, though, one of the measures for that reputational piece, which was really about capability building in some regard, there was a metric, I'm sorry, I just love this. There was a metric called data liberación. It was liberating the data, and it was really a count, and it was rewarded of how many data sets were moved out of silos away from people who were hugging it. I'm being very dramatic, and then placed on an enterprise platform for all access. So I think that's a fabulous way in order to start breaking down when you do have to port silos. But did you want to say anything more about how you all measured that top part of the triangle?
It's very tough to measure things that are intangible. It depends on the project. In some cases, for instance, when we work with United Nations, trying to measure the impact of climate disasters and to see that through the lens of payment cards data, we measure that with the impact that this news or this report had in the media, for instance. So it depends on the project. And yeah, of course, this idea of data liberation, data remaking, I think we would call it. By that time, we still do that in the number of tables, data tables that we are placing in the new platform, which we are already counting around 17,000 tables. We are moving there, so they are available for everybody. But it's very difficult to measure reputational benefits. You have to look at the project and think of, okay, are there any economics specifically linked to this, or this is something more, intangible? But anyhow, you need to get some numbers. Even if it's a number of times it appeared on newspapers, it's something that you can measure.
Now, you mentioned the UN. I know a number of you used partnerships in order to move forward. Donna, I know you said that partnering was a really important activity that helped you move. Can you explain a little bit about how you used partners?
When we thought about the conviction we had around our purpose and our future capabilities that needed to be embedded, partnership is one of them. And we have probably two ends of the spectrum on how we think about partnerships, and they need to sort of really move together up in the maturity. We're not large scale, so we really do need to partner in order to create capabilities. And so you really need to be excellent at what true partnership really is. It's not a transactional relationship. It's probably where we were with vendors in the past. But on our business side, so we have a multi-brand sort of strategy at Bank of Queensland. Virgin Money is one of our brands in our stable, which is fantastic and allows us to have a bit of fun and play with some new ways of working, etc. And that's starting to now move more across into the rest of the bank, which is fantastic. Partnerships really come to life in there because they're business partnerships that they have. We don't manufacture anything in Virgin Money, so it's all about partnerships for our credit cards, for our loyalty programs, etc. So they have a real strength in partnerships in that regard. Some of our other businesses in our finance business with motor vehicle dealerships, motorcycles. There's not one motorcycle dealership in Australia, brand that is not sort of underpinned by BOQ. Harley Davidson, Honda, Kawasaki, etc. So we had to be really thinking about the partnership and their brand value proposition and how do we provide sort of services into that. Then you come to the sort of other sort of spectrum where we're still learning how to partner with startups, and where we would go out and do their cyber review, and for example, and they're not going to meet the requirements that we need. And so for a few months we'd sort of go, well, when are you going to be ready? When are you going to be ready? And now we're sort of rethinking that and saying, actually, we actually have the capability in our organisation. So we should really create in our part of our architectural ecosystem a secure place for them to be able to use cloud computing and cover all sort of the regulatory and authentication, single sign-on type features, etc. That means then we can onboard those partnerships much faster. So we actually get the value proposition to our customers much faster, but also we're taking some of that pain off those startups. So we've had to really rethink. It's absolutely sort of, in fact, even next week we're sitting down with our board and going back through our sort of capabilities and reporting on how we've shifted the dial on what we think about and our execution capability on partnerships. So it's really key to punch above your weight. It's really key to be able to be on the edge of the innovations and the ideas that are sort of coming through and the customer pain points. And so we need to think about that. And I think any organisation that's on this sort of journey, and particularly around data and analytics and so on, how do you sort of move up that spectrum very, very fast?
Yeah, our research shows that especially as you move into market-facing activities with your data, partnerships are becoming really, really important because there's a big jump in capability. When you're talking about data analytics that, again, are facing customers, are facing different types of stakeholders, all of a sudden everything goes up in terms of requirements, everything from your quality to your service delivery, and to boot. Now, Mark, you, I know, also used partnering in that way, right? When Tetrapack started moving more to some of these new market-facing activities, the Plant Secure, for instance, was that?
So I'd say the best example of this is in our move to offer, actually came out of the idea of predictive maintenance first. The idea that we offer our customers a monitoring capability so that we can predict what's going to happen, and at a minimum, warn them in the best of cases to actually sell the outcome of production. And we started, we're mostly an internal IT organization, and then of course we work with suppliers, which is different than partners, right? To get stuff done. But we recognize pretty quickly that we can't actually manage a global collection of data at real-time speeds from that large. There's no way we could move fast enough. I mean, intellectually we could figure out what needed to be done, but our ability to execute would be the problem. And we actually started, to be honest. So don't be surprised if you try to do something on your own and recognize you're not going to get there. So what we've done now is we've partnered with Microsoft because they bring the cloud technology and the IoT base that we want to work with in order to create the scale and the capability to go there. And if I take it another step further from there, is our customers, they want to do the same sort of digitalization of their business, which means, yes, there's a shop floor, but they're also connected up to their operating systems, and they're going to want a feed from that information into their systems just as well as we want it into ours to support them. So how do we go to market there? Well, that's a completely different, that's almost like an integrator. So if we can partner with integrators and other infrastructure suppliers where they want to get into that segment and where we have the know-how of what needs to be done, there's an opportunity to partner to go there as well. So a lot of times it's about speed and capability and a win-win situation between you and who you partner with.
Right. Okay, a couple answers. First of all, lots of questions about are the slides available? And the answer is I don't know.
Of course
I guess we will have to find out if that is the case, but good news is we have articles and readings available. So if you go to the CISR website, cisr.mit.edu, and you do a free registration, all of the CISR work is available to the global community. And that would include the BBVA case, the briefing on data monetization capabilities, and a lot more. And so I recommend that you check that out if you want more information about what we're talking about. We also have an article on how to create successful data strategies, and that's available on our website. So there you go. I mentioned earlier the idea of the algorithmic economy that is here upon us, and the need for us to really think about pervasive use of data analytics. And what we do know from research is use drives value, so it's all about use. And often we can even extrapolate, we can figure out what the use or what the value will be if we know what use is. Now I know, Mark, you have been really working hard on building capabilities for adoption and such. Can you talk a little bit about what you've been doing?
Sure. I mean, at Adobe, it's an interesting culture, because if you look to your left and you look to your right, you're going to see engineers and data scientists pretty much all over the place in every other group. So when we embarked on some of these programs about consolidating data silos and creating some standards around data governance, it had to be very much about value-based. It had to make it easier for them, or significantly easier for them, or they would just do it themselves, or they would hire a third party to do it. And so that kind of approach really was very fundamental to how we went about things like, that they were not very interested in talking about, which was data governance, or they were not very interested in talking about why should I move my silos in there. And it was really about, the value-based approach, keeping it simple. So like our data governance strategy is really, really simple in terms of having, what it takes to get a certified data element. Business steward, tech steward, data quality standards, lineage, different types of governance, as well as characteristics about the data. And then it's like a check. And then when those same business stakeholders sort of experience the positive benefits of that, as another example on the data quality side, we've built in a whole bunch of anomaly detection that can actually notify them when something's going wrong about data that's coming in, or even data that they're producing, how it's going to impact them. Another example is we're looking at how to bind data producers with data consumers. Frequent problem we see is someone produces a piece of data. This happens, an example, in lots of different areas of the company. They're producing data, maybe for 1 or 2 consumers when they start. 18 months later, there's 25 consumers. Who knows who's using that data? So we're actually systemically looking about how to bind them and create notifications and workflows to be able to pull that together to kind of basically have a way to govern the organization, but it's always about showing value. Instead of them coming up with their own new data set, why wouldn't they do it in an area where we have all these capabilities to offer? We've already pre-joined and curated all of this data for them. Why would they do it any other way? And we've actually come up with other methods to, frankly, what we call almost open sourcing our data and our data environment. So we've actually now moved from, used to be we would create data, we always have like 3 ways of delivering, what we call full serve. Full serve, we create the data, deliver last mile analytics and visualization. Self-serve, we create the data, they do the last mile visualization analytics. Co-development, or what we call kind of open sourcing the data, is really they come into our environment and they actually create their own data for others to use. So now they're expanding on what we call this unified data architecture. They're building a nucleus, but they're using the same governance tools, the same capabilities that we are creating. So we're very much moving very hard towards this capability provider, and really to set the organization free in terms of what they can do based on the capabilities. If they have them in-house, or even if they use third parties, it's all fine.
Wow.
How much did you have to do to create a data-driven culture? I mean, you talk a lot about using the common data set as opposed to make your own. Did you also have to fight the belief versus the data-driven aspect? Because definitely in an industrial, that's what we had to do.
Yeah, we almost had a little bit of a different problem. It was, everyone knew they had to be data-driven, and kind of a natively digital company, that's sort of where we're from, but they didn't know the how, and they just start doing things because they can, right? And because everyone can spin up different types of systems. So it was really about really kind of corralling things in a way that made more sense. We didn't have as big of a lift to get to be data-driven. They all knew they had to be data-driven. We're all getting data science training. It's kind of what we're all doing, but the how they do it was just completely all over the board.
It was interesting because if you did a survey in our company, I think they think they're data-driven, but we actually monitor the use of reports and data sets and stuff in quite detail. In fact, at the group management level, we share who the best users are in the management team with the management team.
Interesting.
And it's very different who's belief-driven and who's data-driven. Yeah. But when they see it like that, and then also the idea of trying to get a very simple thing you can test. Try not to use a PowerPoint. Try to log in and discuss the situation on live. It's eye-opening, and it blows the people away that were belief-based because they have no answer.
So it's so interesting you say that, because we actually have this kind of credo, even starting from our CEO, no PowerPoints, no Excels. And when they do quarterly business reviews, it's with the system of record to do the reviews on it, because then there can be no debate about what the numbers are. And it really just reinforces it, and it stops people creating PowerPoints the last minute of the last day and starting throwing numbers up there. And it really creates, it drives the data-driven approach. It drives a single source of truth, which of course is what we're all trying to get to.
I think it drives that performance and quality as well, because you have to trust the data.
Right.
And the efficiency, because there's factories out there sort of reproducing this information in order to get the presentations. Data culture, that was probably the biggest hurdle we had is where people thought they were data driven, but clearly not. But also, I think democratizing the data, liberating, I think is the term BBVA use. It just then starts to take that fear away that I'm giving my data in. It can't be just a centralized. Now it becomes not a centralized, but an enterprise capability. And it also is about sort of structured, unstructured information that you're sort of pulling together, and access to those type of partners that that can really help spearhead you. And once you sort of start to prove those points. The rest starts to flow much faster, I think.
I think most of the analysts, they don't really want to go get and curate the data. They just want to use it, right?
Yes.
So we're doing the same thing, moving much more to where we make it available, and then we empower the organization to do what they think is the fun part, which is to dig into it with support of data science, and then basic reporting and easy access to the data that you need. And our job is to go get it when you can't find it.
So question about the data science piece. So data scientists, let's talk a little bit about talent. Because what we've been talking about is the masses, but then at the end of the day, we do need, we know, deep talent in data science to really power some of the algorithms and such. Now, BBVA, you had a pretty interesting approach to this. And just so you know, BBVA's really, they were adamant they were not going to throw money at data science. That was not going, they really wanted to be purposeful in how they attract, retain, develop their data science talent. Can you talk a little bit about the idea of the emotional salary, or?
Sure,
yes.
sure. Maybe one step before that, to be also clear with the audience on this idea of having a separated entity. This is something that worked during the initial 3 years. We still have it, but we realized that this was not scaling for a company of, we're present in retail activities in 9 countries, other type of banking activities in 30-something countries. 130,000 employees, a team of 50 data scientists could make a difference but not change the company at scale. So in 2017, a second bold move was taken in BBVA, which was to nominate a head of data that was reporting to the CEO, now reporting to the chairman, so it's gone even up. So the idea there was, okay, how do we make this scalable throughout the whole company? And I will come back to the talent. So the first thing is, okay, organizationally, how does this work? Because if you centralize the whole thing, you are not permeating the whole organization and the business area. So even if we had this head of data reporting to the chairman, the structure that he created was a set of heads of data that were co-reporting to him, but each of them belonging to either the 9 countries where we are present or the 4 main global units. So for instance, I am the head of data in client solutions, which is the part that takes care of algorithms within products. And I co-report to the head of data and also to the head of client solutions. So with this structure, we had centralized strategy, but distributed execution. And this worked from a heads of data perspective, but then from there, we started creating like 2 tracks, one on data governance that work the same way. So from these heads of data, I have one person that is called the data portfolio manager that takes care of all the data domain owners within client solutions. So just to give you an example, today we have 1,200 data owners distributed throughout the whole company, and these guys are the persons that are closer to where the data is generated from the business perspective. Okay, so there is one guy in the credit card business that takes care of lineage, content availability, and quality of the data. So we have this program, and then another program is about talent, where we are trying to basically reskill existing talent, 90%, and 10% bringing talent from outside. So reskilling means that taking all our data miners, data analysts, and make them learn Python, Scala, etc. And this is something we are doing with 700 people. Already we are in 70% progress, and 1,200 what we call data specialists, which are more close to what you mentioned about creating reports easier than programming other languages, no? So when it comes to specifically data scientists, because not all these 2,000 people are data scientists, no? And coming back to the origins and the idea of having something different to attract and retain, of course, I mean, these people are special, no? To me, the thing that makes them more special is that they are very, very vocational. What they do is something that they want to do in their spare time. So they are not there just for the salary. Of course they do, and they get good salaries, as you know. But the thing is that, for instance, again, to summarize it a lot, I can think of 3 ideas. One is the competence, the idea of being in a place where you know that you are learning. Another one is the autonomy. They need to have time to do things that are, of course, related to data science, but maybe that are more research-oriented. So, for instance, in BBVA, people can publish papers. They do publish also code. It has to be related to a project, but it can have the level of uncertainty that research has. And this is something pretty new for a company like a bank. So it's competence, it's autonomy, and the third one is sense of belonging. So the purpose idea of being in a place where you're doing something that is going to make an impact in the world. And we try to cover that with projects that are not only business-oriented, but also maybe data for good or things like that. So this is crucial, and we are still trying to apply with, I think, fairly good results.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go to some of the audience questions. And there's a lot of interest in learning about winning over the rest of the organization to adopt, fund these types of strategy, kind of what your secret sauce, and actually change management, changing the minds also. So winning over, changing minds, what's been working for you all? And some of it's come out in your stories, but what would you say would be the big advice you'd give to win over and change minds?
For me, it has to be a multi-pronged approach, because you can't just do tone at the top and say everybody's going to convert. Right? You have to be able to understand and connect people to why they're doing it. So what's the value of and why it's important? How is it going to help them personally? How they're going to help them with their customer aspirations, etc. But also, how is it going to create value for the organisation? And we found many different ways of doing it. So it's not just a presentation or anything like that. It's about immersion. And just demonstrating, building them into the pilot processes. Having very design thinking workshops around what that customer journey would be and how would it be enhanced with AI on it. How the enterprise capability and platforms work, and where you can't develop that individually, you have to create it as an enterprise capability. So I think there's a lot of different reinforcing pieces. Being really patient, I think, with and hold the course on the messaging. We've been through a journey with our business, with our executive, and with the board, that consistently we're been moving them along that continuum, where we haven't just said, here's an aspiration and we'll get there, and it's so far away that you really just can't tangibly hold on to it. But what we've done is we've actually continued to say, that's where we're heading, these are the steps we're taking, and continue to reinforce it in everything you do. It has to be embodied, not just told, right? And so if you can create the examples and then advocate those examples, what's really pleasing and powerful is when you're not the one saying it, when it's actually coming back from the business and they're now thinking about, well, these are the art of the possible of what we can do when we do this right, and when they're the advocates of it. And we're just on the cusp of that. We've still got a little bit of way to go, but we're seeing many more examples where those advocacies are coming back out, and so therefore more people get onto the process.
Right.
I also, one of the key things for us has been, because we have this very diverse set of stakeholders across all these different organizations, is that we've made actually a conscious decision to organize around products. And so the data is the product, and our go-to markets for those data, and this being internal, our go-to markets are the individual organizations that we work with. And the reason that's really interesting is because it helps align them on the common vision, and it helps us align around the data set. So you align around data, and you align around analytical experiences, and you align around a roadmap that does not just individual requests, but every individual request or every augmentation to the data or the analytical experience creates a whole new set of capabilities. And when they become a part of that process, they feel like it's theirs. We literally started, because the same data that we create and do this business analytics, we actually power real-time personalization within the products. And we actually created some tools to allow the business users to extract that data, push it to the products, and do different tests of, oh, you're struggling with this feature, and here's some videos to help, and et cetera. And literally, the business side, we're literally volunteering, can I product manage that? Which was like such a great voice of engagement. Yeah. And so I think that product approach is really, really important around data, business analytics, and analytical experiences.
Yeah.
I think there's two things that happened that opened everybody's eyes. One of them is you started with this 2030 strategy thing. I mean, we've sold products and services for a long time. As I said, we reached this end, so what are you going to do next? And in one form or another, one of the components of our 2030 strategy will be an ambition to connect the food industry. And when you say that, we say connect the food industry, from the farm to the shelf, and you start thinking, what's the only thing that flows through all of those pieces? It's data. It's impossible if you don't start thinking about data separate from the individual pieces. And although we had started with this, the services business, and we had our first data lake, and we're so proud. And then we took a step back, and it's like, oh my God, it's in the middle of a data archipelago. There are islands everywhere, and we're supposed to connect all of this stuff together. So if we want to achieve our vision, we have to get a handle on data. And when you put it in a business strategy perspective, then you're kicking in open doors. And I think one other thing that in parallel that you can find, that you can do already today, if you start some form of data science initiative, the data science team will tell you right away how they can't do what you want to do because they don't have access to the data that's necessary, or it's of so poor quality. And they're coming with propositions to solve real business problems, and they're related to ability to get to data. So that will trigger also. So now the pressure is on us to move fast, because now they know they want it all.
Yeah.
So we have to close. The last 20 seconds, Elena. You want to share one of your key
I would say,
success?
3 things. The first one, and to me the most important one, is to have clear top management mandate. And that reflects also on the organizational structure where data sits. In a company, to me, is something that is crucial. Second is to show the value, continuously show the value, share the success stories all the time. And third, to me, is training beyond data training, specific data science training. So for instance, I myself gave a course to the board of advisors, to the board of directors, that is called Machine Learning for Humans, which was an idea of introduce them into the world of, okay, what is machine learning, what you can do with machine learning, what does it mean to be a project manager when you can have machine learning, which is something that is very important. We also designed another course for product managers, for designers. So you need the whole organization involved in projects to be aware, because you as a data scientist do just one part of a project.
Yeah.
So this is training throughout the whole organization is crucial as well.
Wonderful. Well, we hope this gave you some ideas to move ahead with your data strategies. We do want them to pay off. And please join me in thanking our panelists for a super job. Thank you.